Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about a new lens that I've recently bought, and that's this bad boy, the Samyang 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8. Now, I bought this lens a couple of months ago, and I did make a video back then with my initial impressions, but I hadn't had a chance at that point to use it in any professional gigs. But since then, I've used it on a bunch of weddings, and I'm prepared to now offer you a little bit more of an in-depth thought, tell you what I think about this lens, some of the pros and cons, and whether I think this is a lens that you should consider if you're in the L mount system, or even if you're in the Sony E mount system, because they do make this lens for both the L mount and the E mount system. So I guess a little bit of a background of this lens. Samyang have actually been part of the L mount alliance for a little while now, but they never actually released any lenses until recently. And their first lens into the L mount system was this one. It is 35 to 150, so it covers a huge focal range, and it's f2 to 2.8, so it's really good in low light. So I bought this lens with the intention of having it as my all-in-one wedding photography lens, because I do a lot of wedding photos as well as wedding videos. But when I'm shooting video, I generally use a lot more primes, but I thought for the photo side of things, I would love to have just one lens that I can use all day, whether it's at the bridal prep in the morning, through to the ceremony, the portraits, the speeches, basically everything. So yeah, in this video, I'm going to talk about it, talk about my use experience with it, show you a few example photos that I've taken with it, and yeah, give some final thoughts about whether I reckon it's a good lens for you or not. So yeah, first of all, let's talk about why I chose this lens. Now, before I got this lens, my typical wedding photography setup was I would run a 35mm lens on one hip and an 85mm lens on the other hip, and during the ceremony and the speeches, I would switch that 85 to a 70-200. So most of the day I was switching between two cameras depending on what kind of focal length I wanted to get. And then obviously during the ceremony, you don't want to be in everybody's face, so I was standing back and I was using the 70-200 to get those pictures. The reason why I chose this was it covers all those focal ranges. The difference between a 35 1.8 and 35 at f2 is very little in terms of depth of field. When you get to the 85, again, you're getting that much compression that there's not a huge amount of difference between 1.8 and the 2.3 or 2.4 or whatever it gets to at this length. And then you also have the versatility to go all the way to 150, which obviously isn't quite as far as the 200 on my 70-200, but it's still long enough that I feel like I don't need to get in front of people during a ceremony and get in front of people during speeches. So I just wanted to kind of simplify my kit so I didn't have to worry about as many different variables. If you've shot weddings before, you know it can be a very fast-paced environment. You might be shooting something really wide and then somebody over there might be crying and you want to get a quick shot of them. It's much quicker just to swing around and zoom out as you're going than it is to actually change the camera. Maybe it's gone to sleep because you haven't used it for a while, so you've got to wait for a few seconds for it to wake up. And those little moments can be the difference between getting a great shot and missing it completely. So that's the reason why I wanted to get this lens and try it out at weddings, because I feel like A, it makes my life easier, and B, I feel like I'm not going to miss the shot as often if I have one lens I can quickly zoom into the right focal length. So yeah, I got the lens and I've been pairing it up with my Panasonic Lumix S5 Mark II, and I can't fault it. The autofocus, like the autofocus in the S5 II and the lens basically behaves flawlessly. I haven't really had it misfocus any more than I would with the normal Lumix primes. But yeah, I found that it works really, really well, even in low light situations. So yeah, let's talk about the build quality of the lens itself. So my initial impressions in my first video was that the build quality was really good, and that has only improved. So it feels like a really sturdy construction. Most of the lens is like a metal, I'm not exactly sure what it's probably aluminium or something like that. So most of it is aluminium. The focus rings are nice and smooth. Sorry, the zoom ring and the focus ring is nice and smooth. It doesn't creep, which is an issue that people had with some of the Sony ones. I found if you have it further out and then you drop it like that, it can creep a little bit as you're walking, but not enough that it really makes a difference. If you're one of the people that likes to actually zoom just by pulling that, you can do that as well. Weather sealing is good. I shot a wedding last weekend where it was raining, and yeah, I shot in the rain and it was fine. There was no water came through. So yeah, I'm really happy with the build quality of this. It feels really sturdy. It's nice and heavy, but yeah, can't fault it with the build quality at all. The actual performance of the lens, it focuses quickly, it focuses well, it handles backlit situations really well. The flaring and the sun stars and things like that, I feel like they're not as good as the Lumix primes, because I feel like they handle backlit situations really nicely, and the flaring out of the Lumix lenses is quite good, but it is better than the Sigma lenses. When Sigma lenses are backlit, they have this horrible like green dots on them. Some people really like that. I can't stand it. I think it looks ugly as hell. This handles it pretty well. There's not really any chromatic aberration to speak of, unless it's really heavily backlit in a really busy area like tree leaves or something. And even then, it's very minor. I would say it's on par with the Sigma lenses in terms of chromatic aberration. Again, the Lumix lenses handle chromatic aberration really well. But yeah, in terms of performance, it's great. There is a little bit of vignetting at 35mm when it's wide open, and it does lose a little bit of sharpness at the edges when it's wide open. But depending on what you're shooting, that might not be an issue. If your focus is towards the middle, then the blurriness at the edges is just going to add to the bokeh. Again, I haven't found it to be an issue in my use case. Autofocus performance, like I said, handles it really, really well. It hasn't missed focus any more than any other lens that I would shoot with. If anything, I think it focuses really well, especially when you have subjects moving towards you or backwards, which obviously during a wedding, the bride and all the guys and the girls are all coming down the aisle, so you want to make sure that you do get those guys in focus as they come towards you. And again, later on in low light situations, when you've got dancing and things like that, that is typically where a lens will struggle. I haven't found that this lens has struggled at all in those situations. In terms of its versatility, I think the thing that makes this the most versatile is the focal range. So to be able to go from 35 to 150, I touched on it before, the fact that you can get a lot of variety of shots really quickly is super valuable, especially on a wedding day. And I found that it's actually been really nice to use, getting that variety, being able to just use one camera and have that camera and know that you can get tights, wides, mediums, whatever you need from one spot. I found that it's made me get a lot more shots during the portrait session than what I would normally, just because I can quickly get a wide of the couple, then a medium, and then get some close-up detail shots without having to run around too much and without having to change the poses too much. So it's allowing me to get more photos with different looks really quickly. So I would normally get those same photos, but I'll be changing cameras, I'll be moving around a lot. So yeah, I find that I'm probably getting a wider variety of shots just because I'm able to go 35 to 150 really quickly. For the video performance, I think that it does really well. I haven't used it in video for a wedding yet. I have had a play with it for video. I find the autofocus works really well for video. It handles it really well. I have considered picking another one of these up as my video lens so that I can have just one camera on video and one camera on photo. I'm not there yet, but I may pick another one up later in the year when the Black Friday sales start to come. So then I guess the next thing to talk about is value for money. Now, just recently, obviously this is a relatively new lens. Sigma have recently come out with their 24 to 105 f2.8, which I think is probably the closest comparison to this at the moment. And then obviously you've got your standard primes like your 24 to 70 and your 70 to 200. I think in terms of value for money, this actually sits at a really good price point. It's a similar price to your 24 to 70s from It's actually cheaper than the 24-70 from Lumix, and it's similarly priced to the 24-70 from Sigma. I'm obviously going off Australian prices. Being in Australia, I don't know what they're priced at in the US. In Australia, this is about $1,000 cheaper than the Sigma 24-105 2.8. And obviously you're going to get a bigger focal range in this, but you are missing out at the 35mm, like the 24-35mm end a little bit. That hasn't bothered me in my use case. I don't generally shoot any wider than 35mm anyway. But yeah, I think when you look at value for money, especially compared to similar lenses, I think that it does represent really good value for money. I do think that lenses in general are more expensive than they need to be. And it is an expensive lens. I think it comes in at about 2,000 Australian dollars, so it's not cheap. But I think when you can, like I say, when you compare it to those other lenses, I think the value is definitely there. Yeah, so gone over build quality, gone over value and its performance, but there are negatives, and I don't think that there is such a thing as the perfect lens. So I just wanted to talk over a couple of the negatives that I've found. Now, initially when this lens came out, there was a couple of really big problems. The first big problem was that you'd be shooting, and particularly in burst mode and when you're changing the focal length quickly, and it would come up with it would say that the lens wasn't attached, and you'd have to basically turn the camera off and turn it back on again in order to get going. Obviously during a wedding, this is really bad. You don't want to have the bride walking down the aisle and then you've got to pop a battery because the camera's just decided that it doesn't want to work anymore. It doesn't want to, yeah. So that was really bad. I contacted Sigma straight away when Samyang straight away when I found out about that. And they said that they were working on a fix. They did put a firmware update out a few weeks after I got this, and it seems to have mostly fixed the issue. The first wedding that we shot together, it would have been like 15, 20, 30 times this lens detachment error happened. The wedding that I shot last weekend after the firmware update, it still happened. It happened twice. And both times was when I was shooting really quickly and I was changing focal lengths really quickly. And so there is still an issue there. It is mostly fixed, but they still need to do some work on it. And I believe that they will. I believe that they'll be able to fix this with firmware in the future, but it's just disappointing that they've released this camera onto the market when it's not obviously 100% ready. The other main issue that they did fix with firmware was when you drop the aperture, the shutter speed slowed down for no real reason. Even when you're in manual, if you didn't change the shutter speed when you stopped down, it would still drop the shutter speed. They did fix that. That doesn't happen anymore. So I think that they've definitely taken the issues on board and they've decided to work on them to fix them. The only other main issue I would say, and it's nothing that they can do about it, it's heavy. It's a heavy lens. When you're carrying this around all day, it becomes very, very heavy. It's definitely heavier than the 24-70s. It's not as heavy as the 70-200. So whether that is a negative for you or not, I think that because it means I'm not having to carry two cameras around, it does negate that heaviness a bit. But one camera on your shoulder over the course of a whole day can, you're going to go home sore. But yeah, it's that negative doesn't bother me too much. It might bother other people if you don't want to be carrying a super heavy lens around all day. But yeah, that's I guess that's my review of the Samyang 35-150. It is not the perfect lens, but I think it's as close to the perfect lens that I can get right now for what I do with my wedding photography. Like I said, I am already considering getting another one. So obviously the issues aren't big enough that it's going to stop me from getting that second lens. If you are shooting weddings and events and you want one lens to cover the entire day, that's the kind of person I would recommend this lens to. I don't think it's a very good travel lens because I think it's too heavy for that. I don't think that it's the perfect portrait lens because I think that you're still better off using primes. But for fast-paced weddings and events, I don't think that you can beat this lens right now. If somebody was to come out with with like if Sigma or if Panasonic came out with a 35 to 150 2.8, I'd be really interested to try it against it, because I think that there are improvements that can be made, particularly with firmware, maybe a bit of the sharpness, which could make this significantly better. But for what I'm using it for, I think that it's already really, really good. So yeah, I hope you guys find that, that review useful. If you do, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you're looking forward to a bit more Lumix content in the future. But yeah, overall, I would say great lens. Definitely recommend it if you're in the market for something like this. And yeah, I will catch you guys in the next video. Bye.